Welcome, everyone. This is Main Street Message, a brand new show coming to the Harco Media Network. I'm your host, Brandon Ludwig, and with me tonight, I have Mr. Drake Watson, host of Hometown Huddle. Drake, thanks for coming on the show with us.
No problem. I'm here 24/7 anyway, so it was nothing to step out of the other room and have a seat here.
Yeah, some say you're probably the face of the network.
Whether for good or for bad.
For now. We'll see about that. You know, Larry always told me I had a face for radio, so we'll see exactly how well that pans out.
Don't listen to that.
But anyways, the Harco Media Network, right now we got 3 shows. Hometown Huddle, I Got Your 6, and now Main Street Message. Before we kind of get into what this show is going to be about, you know, I want to take some time and talk about your show and I Got Your 6, hosted by Dirk Harkins. You know, let's kind of start out with Dirk's show.
Sure.
I Got Your 6. We had the pleasure today to kind of hear 2 of his recordings, and just to talk about a guy in general. You know, when you talk about Dirk Harkins, you're probably talking about, you know, one of the greatest guys that you could probably ever come across. His heart's the size, you know, of Harrison County. He loves what he's doing right now. He loves the people that he's helping. He's willing to help anybody. And, you know, I'm not here to tell his story. I'm hoping that one day we can bring him on the show to tell it himself. But, you know, one of the great things is, you know, the second chance that he got in life and what he's doing with it. And it really goes to show, you know, what a difference some people can make and that people can change, and just the impact that he's making in his community. And you get to be a part of that every day too with him.
Yeah, I've joined Dirk a couple of times on a few of his shows. Those ones don't perform very well, but they all perform really well. But it's great to always pick his brain about, you know, I'm not so much of a what person, I'm a why person. And I love asking him, Dirk, why? You know, what's your reason? And, you know, it seems like every time we talk about purpose, we talk about doing the right thing, we talk about giving back, we talk about, you know, the ways in which he helps people, but almost more importantly to me, why he chooses to do that and how he chooses to do that. And last week, we were doing a thing for local news. They were doing a feature on him. And not only did they ask me some questions about, you know, the kind of relationship that we have and, you know, what I've witnessed Dirk do, they asked several other people. And it must have been, you know, it's kind of, I don't know how Dirk feels, but it's got to be a surreal feeling for you to sit over there. Yeah, he was sitting just over there and everybody was sitting here talking about him. And he's got to be, and he should be proud of the difference that he's making in a community. I think all 3 of us have a strong feeling about community and the importance of that and connection and things of that nature. And a guy like Dirk is one of the best guys you could have in any community. He's people helping people personified. You know, he walks around with that. He does everything. I tell the story quite often. After a few weeks ago, we had to go meet with some folks, talking about some things, talking about how we can continue to help people, how Dirk can continue to do the things that he's doing. And he was a little bit late to the meeting, but then when you realize why, he literally went out of his way to help some victims of a fire, some folks who had lost their house. And why else would he be late, right? You know, it's those kinds of things that make Dirk one of the nicest guys to know, one of the nicest guys to have in the community. And you took the words right out of my mouth, or out of my mind, rather. His heart, he's a big guy, but his heart is even bigger. You won't meet anybody with a bigger heart than Dirk.
Yeah, when he talks about people helping people, it's not a motto. It's not a catchphrase. No, it's what he does on a daily basis. And it's one of the things that, you know, makes me just want to be. It's hard to not be a better person when you're around him, or make you want to be a better person. And that show, and like you said, it's making such an impact, you know, not to just the people he's bringing on and be able to tell their story, but the people that get to hear that, and the people that get to, you know, if they can take anything from it, is, you know, just to try to do better for your community, or do better in general. And, you know, and like I said, you know, the second chance that he's got and what he's doing with it, you know, that really goes a long way. And just saying, you know, what people can do and what people are capable of.
Yeah, and when you listen to him talk about his story, I think he does have an episode of his show where he and Mark Smith sit down and talk about a lot of things that happened, and it's very revealing as to why he's so inspired to help people. He felt that there were people in his life who helped him out in a great way in a time of need. And, I was very curious, Dirk, is that why you help people out so much the way that you do now? And he said, yeah. And so it's an incredible story. The episode escapes me, but I do recommend folks go back and listen to that. And I think you were saying how you were going to have him on as well. And I'm sure it's a story that needs to be told. And that's kind of another one of Dirk's things is now it's his turn to be on the other side. And he's asking other folks the questions and getting to know their stories and how inspirational they are in their communities. And so it's one of those things. We've gotten incredible feedback on essentially everything he does. Because everything, you sense that we live in a time where, and we know this, negativity sells, right? It's kind of the way that you get people talking. It's the way you get people clicking for sure. And Dirk is one of those brave, courageous souls that goes against the grain and brings a positive feeling. It's something that you watch. It's something that you listen to. It's something that you think about and feel really good. And that kind of difference that he's making in not just this community, but all over. That's really important.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the goal. I think that's the goal of the network. Maybe his show, importantly, and I'm hoping for this show is, we're not going to focus on that negativity, and he does a tremendous job of drowning that out.
Yeah.
With positive things, positive people, and I can't wait to have him on the show and for him to get to talk about it. And I hope more that this show can help him more than he can help this show. And I think they're going to work well together. And I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for crossover guests and things like that. But if you don't follow that show and you're watching this because it's a new show, or you're watching this because of me or because of Drake, go on, follow I Got Your Six, and you're going to learn a lot of things about a lot of people, and you're just going to feel better about yourself. And that's one of the things, the greatest takeaway I have just being around him or watching any of his shows is you just feel better when you're done.
Yeah, and if you're on the Facebook page, we're all under the same umbrella. We're all on the same roster. All three shows. If you're on the Facebook or the YouTube page, they're all there. So maybe you're somebody who tunes in on Wednesday nights or Monday nights in the future. I'd recommend pulling up that feed on a Thursday night to catch one of Dirk's shows, and then we've got the podcast feeds as well, which are all a little more separate, but. You'll see him. It's hard to miss if you look up I Got Your Six, Dirk Harkins. It's something that's good to listen to on a drive or whatever. No matter what you're doing or where you're at, it's good to listen to.
Yeah, Dirk, we love you. We're supporting you. We're with you all the way, and we're going to do great things here. So kind of let's shift to now Hometown Huddle, another great show that I love to watch, and another way that show and this show are going to have a lot of positive impacts together, because I truly believe that there's great things that can happen with local sports, especially high school sports, that impact communities. And you're doing a great job at kind of identifying those sports teams and those programs that are doing those things year in and year out. And I just kind of want to talk about, what that difference has made with your show and your ability to kind of have a niche to find those things and talk about those things.
I think it's interesting because, I guess the vision for it was you have within recent years, I guess some shows have popped up that are focused on professional sports. They're focused on college sports. Maybe they cover a certain league or whatever. And what we wanted to do was provide something similar to that, not quite your 45-second news hit on a Friday night or a Saturday night that kind of sums everything up really quickly and gives you the information, and that stuff is great. The paper does a great job of that as well. But when you talk about, call it podcast, call it talk show, call it, whatever, it's more of a long-form deep dive into high school sports locally in the Ohio Valley. And again, I think it's also important to note that I think your show will have broad appeal, potentially nationwide or worldwide appeal, because the things that you're going to be talking about, are very applicable elsewhere. Likewise with Dirk, you could be in Eugene, Oregon at 3 a.m. on a Saturday morning, and you could listen to Dirk's show and relate to it. You don't get that necessarily with Hometown Huddle, but it does tie into that local, not just local, but small town. It ties into the small town aspect. And what's also so great about keeping up with the stories and the different things that are going on is you meet athletes, coaches, let's say, that, honestly, I feel honored to be able to talk to those folks, but some of them have stories that would fit right in on I Got Your Six. There are some relationships between community and high school, different sports teams that would fit right in on Main Street Message. And so it's one of those things that really ties it all together. And there's nothing better than a high school football game on a Friday night. It's kind of that feeling. We talked about it very early on when the show launched in July. Those are kind of the things that, myself included, and a lot of people in this area in particular, a lot of folks live for those things. And you have that same feeling with a college game or a pro game, but when it's here, you could go into the stands. The entire county is going to be there, and you're going to run into your old guys that you might be chopping it up with them in the garage or whatever, and you can settle in, get a hot dog at the concession stand. There's a little bit of there's a benefit there as well. Sometimes you have community involvement in that aspect. It's one of the great things that brings a community together. No different with I always use the saying, it's a cold, snowy Tuesday night. You've got your jacket on, you're bundled up, you get out of the truck or the car or whatever, and you make the drive. You try to park as close as you can to the gymnasium, and you feel the snowflakes on your face, and then you walk in, and especially those smaller gyms. That's why we love, small town local sports, because in the smaller gyms, you think of a place like Barnesville is ultra hostile in terms of the environment because everybody's right there. And there's a different kind of feeling when you have those types of things. You can feel the crowd, you can feel the connection that everybody has in the crowd and things like that. And you get a lot of times, if you're brave enough, you can talk to opposing fans, and you might be somebody from Barnesville or whatever, and you might bump into somebody that you otherwise wouldn't have from Woodsfield, because they're supporting the Seminoles of Monroe Central. And so all those things, I could talk for forever about a lot of things that relate to high school sports in the area. But when you talk about the way it ties in with community in that aspect of it, you could go all day, and it's really important.
Yeah, there's nothing greater than when you're talking about a good high school program and what it does for a community as far as bringing everybody together. So many great things have been done. I feel like when a high school team has a good season or there's a good program constantly, and just makes everybody feel better. You were talking about gymnasiums and smaller gymnasiums like Barnesville, and it just puts me in a time back. Coach Madzai and the Harris Central Huskies in 05-06, made the run to regionals, first time in school history.
We had him on the show.
Yeah. And the impact he makes with the stories he can tell and the energy he brings. But the Stevenson Center back then, where the Huskies played, you wanted a good seat. You're getting there 30 minutes before the JV game, let alone a varsity game, and that's something that shows a lot in how much pride there is in a community. And I sit there and I think about the good programs that have come through Harrison Central at times, and right now baseball and softball have really good programs, sure. and springtime for the Harrison's good. But you talk about St. Clairsville and their football program. You talk about Steubenville and how important football is to them. Martins Ferry, it's a tradition going back 100 years probably. You talk about, Indian Creek girls basketball and Union local girls sports in general right now, the last decade that they've had. It really brings the community together, and they go and support those programs. One of my buddies, Shane Kildow, is probably riding around making sure everybody's got their lights off as girls programs that head into regionals or even as far as state. And to see those things and be in those environments, from all ranges, all sports, and see the impact it makes with a community, and see how businesses support those programs, it's just one of the greatest feelings of being a part of the Ohio Valley. And you said that your show just kind of focuses on Ohio Valley sports, but seeing those small communities come together for high school sports, and what those student athletes can do on a court, on a football field, on a baseball field, and I don't know if they even realize the impact that they're having. Yeah, on a grandpa or an old gentleman whose kids have moved away and still continues to go to the sports.
I mean, you think about community involvement, local businesses. One of my, I'm not very popular saying it, in Harrison County, but one of the best football stadiums in the Valley, obviously, is Red Devil Stadium. And you look at the visiting side and all those banners, all those sponsors, all those local businesses that have pitched in because they want to see the youth do well. It's another form of investing in the youth, which is something that I talk about a ton on the show and anytime I can, because it's one of the ways that you keep a community going. It's a way that you can allow your community and its youth to thrive, is to invest in them. And I remember 2023. It was first weekend of June or something like that, and Harrison Central was having a phenomenal year in baseball. They ended up having an incredible calendar year in all athletics, it seemed like, that year. But their baseball team was in the state championship game up at Akron, and I mean, they filled up. It was so special to not only in the stands in Canal Park to see all the blue, black, and silver. And again, it looked like the whole county had made the trip up there. And then they win that semifinal game. They're all staying overnight. So, the Summit County economy is doing great. But I mean, you're driving up there. You're making your way up 77, and you're starting to get out of the valley, right? You're going up past Canton and those places, and every other license plate, Harrison County. Right, so it's just those kinds of things, and then they're all going to the same spots after the game in Akron, and again, I'm sure it's no different. Steubenville football, some people just live for Steubenville football. You would think it's a college program, the kind of pride that they have for Big Red, and St. Clairsville no different. So all those things are just you love to see it, and it's why we try to do everything we can at Hometown Huddle to shine the light on those things, and it's really the coaches, the athletes, that they get it going, and then the community supporting them keeps it going, I think.
Yeah, which the business aspect is just a whole other conversation that we're about to get into with as we go further into this episode. But yeah, just the impact and the feeling that you can get from a good high school program or just high school sports in general in a small community, and to see those people travel and follow that team. You're talking about hosting state championships in Dayton, Ohio, and teams in the Ohio Valley and Eastern Ohio, they travel, and they travel well.
Yes. That I-70 corridor in basketball, and it was so funny you bring up Donnie Madzai, because he's one of those figures that has been in it for a long time as a coach, as an official, as a parent of a couple of athletes, and he and I were talking, and he said, once you hit Guernsey County and you keep going that way on 70, the basketball gets really good. And Cambridge just had a phenomenal year. And then you go, 15 minutes down the highway, John Glenn had a phenomenal year. I think their season was cut short by way of Maysville, who had a great year, West Muskingum. So all those places have done a great job, and even going down to Athens, which is not an easy trip. There are places that are farther away than Athens, but they feel like they're not as far. They feel like an easier drive because Athens is a little bit difficult to get to. But when I got there for, I want to say it was a regional semifinal game or something like that between Maysville and John Glenn, and the entire arena, it felt like, or at least the lower section of it, you look at one corner, all the students are all wearing black. It's a blackout. And then you look at the opposite end, it's a whiteout. And they had that thing packed, and they must have had a similar experience going down there and bumping into fellow community members who had made the trip to see their teams do well. So it's a special thing in the Valley.
Yeah, so Hometown Huddle every Wednesday.
Every Wednesday, 9 o'clock.
9 o'clock.
We're late. We stay up late.
That's all right.
I think Dirk's show comes out a little earlier, but
you can watch it. Mine's probably going to come out earlier than that because I'm an older guy and I want to be in bed before your show comes out. But I look forward to watching it every week. I'm excited about the things you're doing. I'm excited about the opportunity that you're presenting to these younger athletes, to talk about those things, to do comparison, whatever it may be, to get the conversation going in a positive way. And that's another thing that we, I think that we're doing really well, with this network and the things that we're going to be talking about. So now let's get to the bread and butter. Let's get to Main Street message.
What is the message of Main Street? What's the main message of Main Street, I guess? Is this now where I got to ask you the questions, or what are we doing here?
We're still going to let me do all the talking for now and let you chime in when you need to. But, Main Street message, just, again, when I think of the Ohio Valley and I think of the small town communities and, what can be done and what has been done and the small businesses, that I've grown to love. So let's start with small business and community and local business. I have a real passion. I've always been a brick and mortar guy.
Okay.
I see these people and I hear, spouses or family members talk about, Amazon boxes arriving every day, stacking up outside. And I understand that there's some things you got to get from there and you can't get away from that. And it's such a luxury and it makes things so easy. But to support brick and mortar has always kind of been a focal point of mine. And as I get older, to even go even deeper and to support those local homegrown businesses. Some of them are generationally owned, a couple generations. Some of them are, somebody starting a business, late in their career. To support those businesses, because like we just talked about with high school athletics and anything else, the amount that those businesses give back to their communities is unreal. And it's so important that you give that back to them by supporting them. And like I said, I know you can't get everything from a local business, but you can get a majority of the things from a local business. And it's so easy to just support those people and the things that they do, because I see firsthand what they do for their communities and how important it is for local business in a community.
Well, and I think the odds are against local businesses in a certain way, because this is one of the things that I talked about on a podcast with Ohio Eastern is you look at your well, first I think it goes to how we could get so deep into this, and you probably have a lot of good answers on this kind of stuff with your experience, but I think we are a nation that is so tailored to the automobile. You go back to the 50s and the way things are set up, and then that leads to zoning laws and things like that. And then what that leads to is your big plazas. And what do you put in big plazas? You put your big super, what do they call them? Super centers or whatever. And those folks, they've got a smart business model, but if you look at it, I think there's a certain big store that everybody knows that their goal is to have a certain percentage of a market share in every market that they get into. And they sell everything. Like, you can get everything there. I don't think that makes life particularly easy on small businesses. I also think the fact that you put a lot of your restaurants, a lot of your big stores in areas that are almost not walkable at all, and you now have to drive. What's so interesting to think about, this might be like getting completely off the rails, but think about Europe. Think about how condensed and dense those cities are, and you might live 3 blocks down the road, and you need bread or whatever. You're going down, you're walking, because you can walk, and you're going to the local, the local shop to get bread, and then you're going to go another street over to the other local shop to get your vegetables, and you're going to, it's such a, your bigger cities have that a little bit, and obviously rural areas need to be set up, for driving and things like that. But there are some things that I think about a lot, probably more than the average person, that make it tough for small businesses, but it is so important for local businesses.
Yeah, and I understand there's those chain restaurants that make it easy. I mean, now we're even DoorDash and groceries, which is another topic that probably isn't for this show, but things that I think about. And don't get me wrong, it's convenient. Sometimes schedules don't align, and it just takes that much stress off of you. But I guess when I think of like small business, I'm going even deeper, and just like I get to see what the Caddis Business Association is starting to do, and the small business owners that have come together and started these uptown events, these quarterly events, and the impact that it's making, just having 60, 70 people walking around uptown
and what do you
on
get
a Saturday
with that?
night.
You get people bumping into each other. You get that face-to-face that, oh, hey, I haven't seen you in 3 months. And then you got people interacting. There's a lot of things like that do to help our society, I think, as a whole. There's a guy I know particularly well that doesn't, I could walk in with a coffee that is clearly from a shop, and I try not to go to any of the chains. It's got to be a local one. He's upset with me because maybe it cost $4.55, but sometimes that's not the reason you go. The reason you go is so you bump into people. Your village events, your local businesses. I think I love when you go to a town like a Barnesville, like a Woodsfield, like a Cambridge, like a St. Clairsville, Caddis, name them all, Bel Air. And I always try to drive through the main part of town and just look at the buildings and see what kind of local business scene there is. Because when you have that, like you mentioned with the community events, I think a few weekends ago we had that event in Cadiz, and so many people walking around on the sidewalk. You're bumping into people. It's such a social event that I think is healthy for a society.
Yeah, and I just think that there's so much of that going on in the valley. I know Wheeling has kind of taken a turn for the better, and there's a lot of business development down there, and the events have kind of really picked up, and businesses are getting involved running events, which I think is all great things. St. Clairsville Chamber of Commerce has done so well in the last couple of years with their events. I believe that the Cadiz Business Association is really picking up, and there's some business owners, Thelma Olive and Peace Flower Pottery and Farmhouse Renovations, they're kind of taking that charge and leading that to kind of get that foot traffic uptown. And I what I try to tell business owners is, yeah, you might have to be open on a Saturday night when you normally aren't, but if 50 people come in your store, and even if they don't buy anything, the likelihood that they know that store is there, and the chances that they can come back, benefit you in so many more ways down the road. And I just think that seeing the impact and what it's doing when we have those, and what, like I said, St. Clairsville does, and it's just so beneficial to the community to have a lot of foot traffic uptown and support, and then it supports the restaurants, because you can come back on a Saturday and say, oh, I'm going to go here, here, and here, and then let's go grab lunch at the local restaurant. And to me, that's what thrives in small communities, and that's what makes a difference. And and it's even family time together, if it's
right, make a day out of it.
Yeah, make a day out of it, and then then you can go later on in the evening, go do some stuff that doesn't involve local businesses. But there's so many things to do in the valley, and identifying those things, and maybe putting some extra spotlight. Not that these places aren't doing a good job of that, but just to give them extra support, and kind of explain some things that people might not understand, and why they do it and how they do it this way. And I think those are all things that we need to hit on, and we need to be positive about, and I want to continue to support those things.
Well, and how about the story for Wheeling? Doing another podcast down there it was very eye-opening with some of the people that we talked to, and some of the people that we knew from Wheeling, who gave us an inside look at what their I forget what they called it, but when they redid all their streets and their downtown, basically, and it's beautiful, by the way. But I don't know if you were in the room when we talked about it or not, but people were not the most thrilled at the beginning of that process. But now you've got people like me who I didn't go to Wheeling very often before they did that, but now it's a place that you want to be, because it's a place that is suitable for local business and community events and those types of things, and it has opened the door for that. And now you could literally park. I know this because I do this all the time. You could park by the suspension bridge. You could walk. There's so many different places to go right then and there. And then you walk all the way down to what do they call it? The port down there. And then there's other things there. And guess what? The Nailers are playing that night. I mean, you could walk that entire area, and literally, probably all day, you could find things to do.
Yeah. So I think Wheeling, they basically sat down and said, we're going to do this master plan, and we're going to identify the key things that we need to change, we need to fix, we need to upgrade. And infrastructure is one of them. And that's a topic that I feel like we're going to talk about a lot, because infrastructure in the Ohio Valley is a need, and upgrades are a need. And every small community is dealing with it in some form or fashion. Some are handling it different than others. It's been a big thing for Cadiz over the last decade. It's been a big thing for a lot of small communities in the Ohio Valley, Eastern Ohio, that I think Wheeling kind of basically just laid it out and said, here's what we're going to do.
And we're going to do it all at once.
And we're going to do it all at once. And it made an inconvenience for a lot of businesses. There was a lot of talk. But, once they got through it, and kind of once you saw what happened and the impact it made, and, the ability it is now for walkability downtown Wheeling, when you hear stories of, when my dad talks about stories about Wheeling, back in the, 60s and 70s, how it was, you used to go to Wheeling like people now say they go to Pittsburgh. And that's, that's just right down the road from us. Mm-hmm. And I believe that's starting to come back. And, there's a lot of events going on in that community, in that city, that I think are really making a difference. Not just for Wheeling, for the Ohio Valley.
Yeah.
I think you start to see a lot of other communities benefit from that, and I think everyone working together and benefiting from each other is a good thing in this part of Ohio and this part of the Ohio Valley.
And that's one of those places where, you'll bump into a lot of people. You might not know all of them, but it's an incredible opportunity to meet people and people that you might not have met otherwise. Same thing with your local chamber of commerce things that go on. It's all kind of suited for networking and those kinds of things, and shaking hands and getting to know people. And when you've got local people and just the whole community coming together in that way, it's a really great thing for the community.
Yeah, and I think, back to these businesses, the fact that, a place like Wheeling can go and do all of that at once, kind of long term, make it beneficial for them. Other communities are trying to do that, to have that buy-in from both the government side and the business side.
It's probably not easy to get those kinds of things accomplished from the government side, and those kinds of things.
There's a lot of kickback. There's a lot of pushback, but to kind of see the vision and see where it can go and what it can do, I think that's very important for both sides.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
So we got infrastructure we want to talk about. We got community projects we want to talk about on this show. Small businesses. I can't stress enough how important small businesses are to me. When you just look in Caddis alone, and you got the Orms Hardware and the Clark Kirkland Bar, who I probably has never said no to anybody when it comes to some sort of donation, and I feel like all these small businesses give so much. It's not astronomical amounts, but they give to anyone that probably asks. And again, to piggyback off of that, in other communities, you have St. Clair Building Center, you got the sports shop in St. Clairsville, Chestnut Lanes, Waterfront and Wheeling. Like, all of these businesses understand the importance, and I can't stress it enough, to just the support for them is tenfold.
Yeah. All those local businesses, and I think when you want to sum up and you want to give a synopsis of what Main Street Message is and will be about, it's things like that. It's things like, let's shine the light on the people behind these small businesses who are so integral for a community. Likewise with your community events. And, it might not be a business event uptown, but it might be something going on down at Wheeling, and it's live music. There's something going on at the park somewhere. It could be at Sally Buffalo. Those kinds of things, which are also important. Again, you have that sense of community. You have that socialization. Several other things. I mean, why are certain things the way that they are, right? I've told you probably 5 times now, why can't we just build a sidewalk? Because, there's so many things that go into things like that. And, what's the situation with the roads? Who's in charge of the roads? You got a lot of folks, I think, and it's not really, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but you've got some folks probably don't even know if they live on a township road, a county road, a city street, a state route, U.S. route, whatever. And those types of things, and the way that those work. How does local government tie into that? How do, you hear about it seems almost every November we're talking about another race. And I think in the even, in 24, 28, 32, you get distracted by the national stuff, but almost all the time there is a local thing going on that has the potential to impact people's lives right here. Whether it's your commissioners, your township trustees, your village people, whatever. There's a ton of different things that kind of make this all go. And that's why I think Main Street Message has probably one of the more, diverse and versatile skill, like things to talk about. So many different things, because those all are involved in making the community go. And that's kind of, there is no Main Street without all those things.
Yeah, when you talk about all them projects, and one of the key important factors that communities take into account is funding.
Yeah. Oh,
So
yeah.
when you talk about funding for a project, that might be substantial or just any project, funding always changes when you talk about at different levels of government, whether it's state, federal, local. So when you go after grants, there's so many different requirements and there's so many point systems. There's so many, obstacles that you got to be able to do. There's matches. A lot of communities qualify for grants, but the biggest point scoring system is can you match 25%? Some communities struggle with that, and sometimes people don't always know that. Road projects, there's a lot of engineering work that was required at the state level, the federal level. There's so many things that you have to check mark and checklist to do, and those things take time. Whether it's acquiring easements or securing funding from a different funding source to kind of get that match. So there's a lot of moving parts in those projects. And I know, one of the things I learned early, working at the state level, one of the biggest jokes that one of the guys always said was government's hurry up and wait. And, that's not the answer everybody wants to hear. And that's certainly not, what we want, but, sometimes there's so many checks and balances that
Right.
to get that funding
In a certain way, that was kind of
gotta,
designed that way so
Yeah.
that, you don't just make decisions on a whim.
to get that funding, you got to go through a lot of different scenarios. And at the end of the day, everybody wants to be able to fund a project 100%, but that might not always be the case. So, there's a lot that goes into, local governments, whether it's, village councils, county commissioners board, even at the state level with the state senators and state representatives, voting for that funding and the requirements for that. But there are a lot of communities that are getting projects done, and we want to highlight those things, and we want to, highlight the positives that are going on from, whether it's a Nature Works grant for a trail in Bethesda, or it's a, $5 million sewer project, in a bigger city. All of those are important things, and all of those are community things that people benefit from.
I think one of the things that, and this is me kind of thinking out loud, which I think I do 24/7, which is not good. But, I think a cool idea for maybe an episode, if I'm a stranger and I'm hearing about Mainstream Message for the first time, what are the things that I want to know about? Maybe that's just because I'm 21 years old, so I don't know how things work. I don't know anything about anything. But I think a lot of what you just talked about in the past 5 to 7 minutes, like almost every other word you could break down. Like I could ask, what is that? Why? Like, you could really go deep into explaining a lot of these things. And, what is an easement? What is the process of trying to apply for a grant look like? All those kinds of things, I think, to the untrained ear, to me, are fascinating. And maybe that's, something where you could tie in. I don't want to reveal too many of your secrets, but like maybe you get some folks that are involved in that stuff coming on to talk, just again, half-baked me thinking out loud, but
Yeah,
I'm not half-baked. That thought was half-baked.
I definitely think that the opportunity for guests to come on here and the knowledge that they can provide. If you're still watching, if you haven't jumped off and scrolled through your Facebook's page a couple times, stay on the show. I think there's a lot that this show is going to be able to provide. But next week, one of our first guests.
Yep, there we go.
Mr. Don Jones, who's the executive director now at USDA for the farming side, and his time as state rep, the amount of knowledge that he possesses and the ability that he has to kind of speak that information out and get it across to people, and he does it in such a positive way.
Oh yeah,
I mean, that's one of the shows that I'm super excited for, and I know it's only going to be the first show after this one, but the amount of guests that we have lined up and where we're kind of thinking in the direction that we're going, I think are all going to be able to answer those questions, as long as also talk about just great things that are going on in their communities and the surrounding communities.
Yeah, no doubt. I think, and I don't think there could be a better get for the the real first episode. And
Yeah.
I'm somebody. Go ahead.
Yeah, so if you're sitting
Host.
there and you're watching this show and you think there's something going on in your community that needs to be talked about in a positive way, like, we want you to comment, we want you to message the page. We're excited about what we can do. There's even There's even a mobile version that we're looking at coming out with Main Street Mobile.
You talk about an inside look or a real deep dive. What better way to do it than actually going to one of these local businesses?
Yeah. I want to go inside these businesses. I want to talk about the things that they do, talk about the things that you have access to, talk about some of the important projects that are going on in your community. Talk about some of these bigger events. We talked about the wheeling events. St. Clairsville's got some big events coming up. Caddis and Harrison County have great events. Market the Park's one of the greater things in this area.
For sure.
To provide free music or cheap music all summer long. A lot of people don't know about those things.
Yeah.
So this is a great way to either find out what's going on through us, let us know some things that are going on that maybe we can attend or we can talk about, or people that you think might be important to come on the show. So we're always looking for those opportunities, and we're always excited about different ways that we can educate people.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Well, I don't know about you, but I kind of, in anticipation, you talked about Don Jones. One of the reasons why I was so eager to get to listen to what he had to say is because of his, not only his role at USDA, but his time serving the 95th District. And again, you talk about maybe the closer you get to DC, maybe the more removed they are from like your everyday life in Harrison, Belmont, Jefferson, Monroe, Guernsey counties. Like, it's the state level of things that are also really important because they're making decisions that are directly tied to the people of the area's lives. And so it's a great. I don't want to spoil anything, but I may or may not have gotten to sit in and listen to that, and it's a good one. Nobody will want to miss it.
Yeah, and I think that's important also, to talk about Eastern Ohio. Eastern Ohio is so unique.
Oh.
When you talk about Central Ohio compared to Eastern Ohio.
Even Northern Ohio.
And even Northern Ohio. You talk about, just different parts of different counties. We talk about Harrison County can probably generally be the same. Jefferson, the biggest difference is probably Steubenville. You talk about Belmont County. You want to talk about a split in a county.
Split it right in half.
Right down the middle, west of St. Clairsville.
That's the Midwest.
And then you go down on the river, you're talking about a whole different
You're talking about
type
Appalachia.
of county.
Yeah.
So to identify those things and recognize that stuff and be able to talk about it and be able to, hopefully talk to some important people in those counties and how they adjust to the differences in those things are all things that I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, you talk about, like, this is why, like, I haven't spent a ton of time outside of Ohio, but of course I'm biased, but I'll always defend it and always talk about, not arguably in my mind, it's hands down the greatest state in the union because of the diversity, like you were talking about, that it has, and the great minds that come out of it. And again, some of those great minds are the local business leaders in these communities that you will be talking to. So there's a way to tie it into that as well. But where else can you find a city? If you like a city, if you like that kind of atmosphere, you've got three good ones, all in the state of Ohio. If you like the rural side, you've got a lot of a rural area. But do you like your rural areas flat? Do you like the hills? Do you like the lakeside? Do you like? It's got it all. I would cut a commercial, it feels like, for the state of Ohio right now. But
yeah, I don't want to get into a whole lot. We got a lot of great shows coming up. I think this was a great first episode. I think we talked about a lot of things. I'm excited for the other shows as part of this network and the correlation between the three of us and what we can bring and what we can offer and the information that we can provide. So I want to thank you for coming on this first episode. I kind of have a feeling that you're going to be off camera next episode, but
yeah,
you're still going to be in the conversation. So I'm looking forward to that as well. And if you stayed through and you watched this whole thing and you haven't followed the page yet, go ahead and follow that page. We're on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify,
Apple. Well, there's a whole bunch of podcasts too.
We're everywhere.
Not even aware of.
We're everywhere. So just thank you for tuning in, and hopefully you tune in next week and you continue to follow us. So thanks guys. We appreciate it.